in that the opportunities exceed the things you have to give up. You have to give up a large part of the, and eventually almost all of the coal mining activity. What happens with beef, my climate group, Breakthrough Energy, just announced literally today an investment in an Australian group called Ruminate that helps cows not be so much a source of methane emissions. So we have two paths to solving that. That's 6% of global emissions are cows who burp and fart methane to an extreme degree. You can either fix the cows to stop them doing that, or you can make beef without the cow. And both of those, will be pursued to see which one can lead to the best product.
One crucial part is agriculture, and one thing you said you were particularly surprised by was how great a problem bovine flatulence is. Do you want to explain what that is and why it's a problem?
Yeah, so the animals that can eat grass have very unusual stomachs that have these bacteria that are methanogenic in there, and so they leak natural gas both out the front and the back. And so people have said, well, let's change the hay or throw some things in there. And nobody knows how to get rid of that.
How to get cows.
In glycol and organic compound 3-nitrooxypropanol, known as 3-NOP. So the Food Standards Agency last year found that 3-NOP, quote, should be considered corrosive to the eyes, it's a skin irritant and potentially harmful by inhalation to humans handling it. In a joint statement from Morrison's, Aldi and Tesco, they said, we have the ability to address some of the climate challenges facing our food system. It's this collective approach that is really going to make a difference. And being involved in using a feed additive is a great way.
Yeah, so there's basically two ways to help with cows. Cows are about 5% of global emissions, which is pretty unbelievable.
Wild!
And if your goal is to get to zero, you don't get to skip the cows or the steel or the cement or, any of those big areas. So there's a whole class of solutions of making meat without cows. Today, it doesn't taste as good and it costs too much. It's going through a little bit of a lull, but those companies, Impossible Beyond, Memphis, and others, are pursuing that. In terms of the cows, we pursued many solutions. So one is to vaccinate the cows in a way that their gut bacteria that emit the methane, which is also called natural gas or CH4, which is the second most important greenhouse gas, you can vaccinate them and that species of bacteria isn't there. Their stomachs are very special because they can eat grass. It's a 3-stage fermentation process, basically. There's another way you can change what they eat, and you could either put that in their water or their feed. There is a drug to change the microbiome, not a vaccine, but a drug. That looks very promising. And then there's a solution where you stick a sort of a metal thing into the skin of the cow, and it actually burns the methane. And all of these look to be quite cheap.
The molecular structure of methane does react to photons from the sun, from sunlight, infrared rays, ultraviolet rays. The methane molecules last between 7 and 12 years. They get naturally broken down by all factors of the environment, including ultraviolet rays from the sunlight. The methane molecules mix with other molecular structures within the atmosphere, and that breaks them down and creates what you would call a dipole degradation of the atomic structure of the actual methane molecules. But the good news is, and in other words, the hydrogen part of the atomic structure of methane, although having a trace element of the C14 radioactivity, only last for between 7 and 12 years. So the good news in all this is if your cow farted, or you'd been to Taco Bell and farted 7 to 12 years ago, that methane is broken down into the atmosphere and gone. Doesn't exist, can't find it. This is because the hydrogen atoms in the methane molecular structure haven't got the isotopic strength that C14, carbon-14 has, you see. So its atomic makeup, its structure, molecular structure, has a lot less instability, you could call it, because see, carbon-14, it's more radioactive because it has an unstable nucleus. It contains too many neutrons, 8 of which are 6 of its protons. For 8, you have 8 to its 6 protons. Okay, so it's got all these neutrons running around, creating an instability, and it's hard for these unstable, powerful molecules to break down. They hold their radioactivity. Their atomic numbers are not even. Like they have a sort of a little bit of a mismatch, which creates these fast orbits and continuation of orbits looking for dipole positions. So yeah, they're a scary thing. The C14's scary. It can last over 5,700 years and all this sort of thing. Like it doesn't break down like methane. Methane breaks down. See, methane has a molecular composition of stable carbon atoms. So they're 13 atoms, and the hydrocarbon atoms in them, which have a tiny bit of radioactivity, but it's balanced. All their molecular structure is more balanced and stable. So it's more prone to be covalently bonded with other dipole electrical circuits of other molecular structures. So yeah, it's not as bad. The methane is not as bad as C14. You can categorize it, methane, by calling it carbon-13 atoms, right? You could then sort of look at the next level, which is 14, carbon-14. And thank goodness, because it's so common, because the carbon, the methane that's produced, the hydrocarbon that's produced, is produced from plants dying. It's produced from animals rotting, swamps, cows farting, humans farting. It's a very common, very, very common thing on the planet. And plant life needs this, it's the same CO2. They need it to survive. Plant life absorbs methane. So it's part of the natural cycle. Look at how harmless methane really is, okay? There are companies around the world that are creating what you would call artificial methane. It's called synthetic methane. And they make it with these great big draw fans out of the atmosphere that draw air over pools of chemical that grab the CO2. They grab the methane, they grab the CO2 in the atmosphere. Some propose to do this and are doing this with a form of nickel catalyst, but that's a different one to the catching the carbon from the air. You're taking the carbon out and then liquefying it, basically putting it through a process and turning it into a fuel. Synthetic methane. I mean, you've heard of methanol and things like that in your cars. That's a similar type of principle, but it's not created the same way. It's created differently, but it is synthetic methane. So basically, they're catching carbon dioxide, right? And it's amazing when you think about it, because the very thing that they talk about that's creating the extra photon energy and the redistribution of heat from the cold atmosphere, you know, up there is incredibly wrong. But it's incredible to see just how common methane is and what it is when you really take a closer look at what methane is. Well, you have all these people creating methylation stabilizer reaction plants to create fuels, new fuels. You have another group of people saying that methane's bad and destructive to the ozone layer and the planet. You see, you've got to bear in mind, if you go deep into your research, you will find that not all hydrogen atoms are radioactive. And only the isotope hydrogen-3, or tritium, is radioactive. Now, where have you heard the word tritium before? Tritium is the last radioactive material that they separate out of the reactor circuit in nuclear power stations. And where does that tritium get watered down and put into? Guess where? The ocean. Yeah. Does it emit gases? Do those radioactive gases from the tritium evaporate up into the atmosphere? Damn sure they do. And is radioactive tritium, unstable? My word, it is. It is, because it's got too many neutrons that cause it to undergo beta decay, which is a form of radioactivity. The very people that are acting in the world's best interest when it comes to, radioactive gases in the atmosphere that are causing excitement through photons and heat from the sun, these very people that are doing all this, to stop pollution and increase the air quality and stop global warming, they are the biggest contributor to global warming. But mind you, radioactivity and radioisotopes under freezing conditions, mate, does fuck all. That radioactivity up in the sky there, created from even nuclear blasts on the planet of the Earth, and gamma rays that naturally happen, that's all frozen, man. Its radioactivity and its atomic movement would be fucking zero up in those sub-fucking 58 degrees places up there in the atmosphere. Go 12 kilometers and up. So it debunks all theory. All theory that you can put forward gets debunked by the Curie temperature of the atmosphere. You see, when it comes to radioactivity and photon excitement and expanding and stretching of all these molecular structures that do naturally do that. All atomic structure has to move. That's how it stays in existence. Some of it's stable, it's electronically balanced. Others are not so electronically balanced. But just as hydrogen comes under the laws of every electromagnetic force on the planet, so too does radioactivity, even though it's got strong orbital boundaries that it doesn't easily get decayed or absorbed into other molecular structure. It still comes under the breakdown of the sunlight itself. The ultraviolet, the infrared, that all breaks down radioactivity. It doesn't increase it. It doesn't enhance it. It might stimulate it and increase its activity, but in doing so, it decays it. So the sunlight that creates energy, creates radioactivity, also destroys the molecular structure of radioactivity. I know that sounds crazy, man, but scientifically, it's factually correct. And always remember, the proton side of these molecular structures is the lightest element in the universe. So anyone who tries to tell you that it doesn't go up beyond 12 kilometers and up into the high, cold atmosphere is telling you a lie. So if they're going to say that all this radioactivity and all these molecular structures are just going to stay around the Earth and not Curie temperature into the other gases and the atmospheric nitrogens, oxygens, and all the rest of it, don't read their science books properly and don't understand science for the reality that it is. So the product they call the radioactive tritium in the water that they release, of 1 part per 100 part, that they say is natural, It's not, man. It's not natural. But guess what? It breaks down too. At 12.3 years later, that radioactivity's gone, man. You see? So it's like we can scaremonger all we fucking want, man. But it's like I said, your cow in the paddock, it farted 7 or 10 years ago, or 12 years ago. That methane, it's gone. You see how crazy Bill is? He's got good intentions, but he's ignoring the facts. You've got to examine the full facts before you start making a scaremonger on the planet. Just because you have the ability to read the CO2 levels and the radiation levels. Everything's decaying. And how? Through the sunlight, man. Through the very thing that excites and creates the radioactivity movement, the atomic movement, and all these molecules. You see? So, see how science, if you gain a fuller understanding of science, you don't have to live in fear. You don't have to be so scared that the planet's going to burn up because of big holes in the ozone layer and great big fucking masses of radioactive photon movement that's generating heat from this cold 58 below 0 degrees place. But see, have a great day, TikTokers. Just have a good day.